In this video, we're going to introduce the concept of regular expressions and how you can use those regular expressions in C#. So let's take an example. So here we have some text, and in this text we have embedded, as you can see, a number of phone numbers, like so, and a few things that aren't phone numbers. So what we'd like to do is to create some relatively simple regular expression code and use that regular expression code inside of a C# program. So let's consider what that would look like. Let's bring up Notepad here and consider what our phone numbers might look like. So we might have a phone number that has an area code, and that area code would be in parentheses, followed by a sequence of 3 digits, followed by a hyphen, and a sequence of 4 digits. Or that area code might not be surrounded in parentheses, but just have a hyphen in front of it, or after it. Or we might, in fact, not have an area code at all. And further, we have a situation where you can't have area codes that start with 0. You can't have area codes that start with 1. And the same is true for prefixes. So there's no 0, number, or 1 number prefixes. So let's construct a regular expression that would match phone numbers given that pattern. All right, so let's start with the idea that we want to have 3 numbers or 3 digits in a row. So the way we can do that is use square brackets, and the numbers that we want are the digits 2 through 9, because, as I said, an area code cannot start with a 0 or a 1. And then the second set of digits, or the second digit, could be anywhere from 0 to 9, and the third digit could also be anywhere from 0 to 9. Now that series of numbers may in fact have parentheses around it, so that's part of our search. But that sequence of digits, that number, may or may not actually be in the pattern. And so what we have to do is we have to say it's optional. So we put a question mark in there, and in terms of regular expressions, question marks mean that the thing may or may not be part of the pattern we're trying to match. The area code may be there, but in fact there are some instances where there is no area code. The next thing we have to do is allow for the fact that parentheses are actually a specialized character inside of a regular expression, and so we have to say that these are not the special parentheses that have a particular meaning inside of a regular expression, but they're actual parentheses. In other words, we put a backslash in front of each parenthesis saying, I don't want the specialized ability of a set of parentheses in the regular expression. I'm actually looking for a set of parentheses. Now I encapsulate that entire expression, as far as I have it right now, by saying all of that may or may not be there. Now, to make things more interesting, while this may or may not be there, the other possibility, in other words, that's this one, the other possibility is that this may or may not be there. And so I need to say one or the other. So I'm going to put a pipe or vertical bar, and that means or. And now I have to try to match this part of my pattern. And that's going to look similar to what we have here. In other words, it's going to be a number from 2 through 9, followed by a number from 0 through 9, followed by a number from 0 through 9. Like so. And then after that would be a hyphen. But of course that also may not exist, so I surround this with parentheses, and these are the regular expression parentheses as opposed to looking for a set of parentheses. I surround that with parentheses, and I say that also may or may not be there, so I put a question mark after that. And then finally, this entire expression is surrounded by parentheses, effectively meaning that's the first unit that may or may not be there. So the first unit of our phone number that may or may not be there is an area code, and if it's there, it might have parentheses, or it might be postfixed by a hyphen. Then we move on to the next part of the phone number, and that is, again, a digit that ranges from 2 to 9, followed by a digit that ranges from 0 to 9, followed by a digit that ranges from 0 to 9. And that has to be as part of the phone number, and so we will not include a question mark with that expression. And following that, we are requiring a hyphen, so that says that there's a hyphen in the regular expression to be searched for. And then we have 4 more digits. So that's our regular expression. It gets to be a little bit long, and as I said, this is not going to pick up every phone number, but it'll get the vast majority of them. So let's take that string and translate it into a pattern that we can use to create a regular expression. And for that, we will take a look at Visual Studio. We have an example of this here. So this is the regular expression phone numbers example. And here we see the regular expression that we constructed. And just above that, we see our input data. And so just to remind you what that input data looks like, we have it here. So this is the input data that we'll be searching through, and we'd expect to see that as a phone number, and that as a phone number, etc. But there's also some things in there that we would not expect to see as phone numbers, and we hope that those get filtered out. Right, so that's what this data right here is. Now I do want you to note in our phone numbers pattern that I do have those same backslashes that we had talked about before, but you'll also notice that there's 2 backslashes. And the reason for that is because not only do backslashes have a special meaning in regular expressions, they also have a special meaning to the C# compiler. So the C# compiler will try to interpret those backslashes, and we have to defeat that ability of the C# compiler to do that. And in order to do that, we put in another backslash telling the C# compiler that that backslash is to be used in the regular expression and not to be interpreted by C# or the C# compiler. And so we have to do that with each backslash that we have. Now, alternatively, you could use something known as the verbatim operator. So that would look like this. You'd put an @ in front of the string, and then you would only need to have 1 backslash. So what the verbatim operator does is defeat the ability of the C# compiler to interpret those backslashes. So if you have a lot of backslashes in your regular expression pattern, you might consider using the verbatim operator. For our purposes, I only have a couple, so I'm going to go ahead and leave them in just as they are, like so. Okay, so now on to actually creating the irregular expression. The resources I'm going to use are from a namespace system text regular expressions. So you'll probably want that using directive. You will not need a special reference for this. And I'm going to show a couple of different ways that you can sift through those through that text to find phone numbers. So the first is actually creating a regular expression object. And so here you see that. Regex is the name of the class, and I called it find phone numbers. And I'm going to supply to it, upon construction, the pattern that I'll be looking for. So in other words, this thing, which is my regular expression version of what a phone number looks like. And then I have a real simple for each loop here. So I call the matches method associated with my regular expression object, and I supply to it the input text. I don't have to supply the pattern because that was supplied at construction time. And then it's simply a matter of printing that value out. Alternatively, you could also use a static approach, and that would look something like this. So I call regex match as a static method. I give it the input text, which is again the text I'm searching through, and the pattern, the regular expression pattern, which is the one we constructed here. And then for each of those numbers, I print the value out. The way this one works, instead of giving me a data structure full of those values, what it does is finds one at a time. So this first one would find the first phone number, and then after that, I call next match, which advances the pointer on the input text to the next location. And if that was successful, I will continue the loop, and eventually this test will not be successful, or that is to say, the search for the regular expression pattern in the input text will not be successful, so that'll be false and will fall through the loop. So we'll run that code, and I get the results you might hope for. These are the phone numbers found in the input text. And now you will notice that I do get a couple of numbers here without area codes that we might want to have filtered out. So if we go back and look at the input text, that's this one and this one. So I will leave it to you to decide whether or not it's worth trying to expand this regular expression pattern a little bit, so that if it finds an area code that's incorrect, then it will not match the rest of the phone number, which without the area code would be a perfectly valid phone number. So that's an introduction to regular expressions, the system.text regular expression namespace, the regex class that we can use to create regular expression objects, and a couple of their methods.